my very basic understanding is that there is basically a list of criteria, and these are, yeah, some of them are neurological, some of them are
Mm,
behaviorist, and
mm,
basically, if you tick a certain amount of boxes, you are officially clinically diagnosed as autistic. Am I correct in that assumption?
yeah, yeah, that is the general, yeah, that is the general way that one gets diagnosed. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah.
What if I may ask, what is your situation? What are the boxes that you would say that you're basically ticking here? Um, where you would say, okay, this is
Mm.
clearly that. So you have been diagnosed, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, the thing is, like, I can't give, like, like those clinical details, like, because I was diagnosed when I was very, very young.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't even like remember it. Like, I was like 3 years old, I think. And so, I can't like, get up a report and say exactly which boxes I ticked and stuff. What I can do is I can describe and explain like, the symptoms, if you like, that I currently experience. Um, yeah, and I mean that includes lots of well, it's kind of hard to know where to start. It includes a lot of sensory issues. I don't like like loud noise and or like uncontrolled loud noise. Um, just like lots of stuff going on and things like that can be extremely overwhelming, and in some cases it can almost cause like physical symptoms. And so that's like, I do experience the common sensory issue things. For some people it's more visual. For me, the primary kind of sensory processing issue is like auditory. Like I don't like noise, but I also have issues with visual sensory processing issues. Like, if I'm trying to go to sleep and like there's some light on or something, it I just can't relax and stuff, for example. And also some tactile sensory issues. But that's not actually the main thing that I talk about, because like, I like to focus on because I can to an extent I can control that. I can control my environment in that way. But the main thing I talk about is the social skills aspect and how that has, at least I believe it's held me back a lot. And it's quite annoying because people will say stuff like about, especially like certain groups of people online, it's like, oh, it's all about looks, right? In terms of like your success in dating, even in things like employment and friendship, and which to me, those things that I do consider quite important, like,
Yeah, we definitely gonna
and
get there. We
yeah.
definitely gonna talk about
Okay, all
lookism as
right.
well.
Well,
Yeah.
I'll just brush over that. But
Mm-hmm.
in terms of just like social skills, I cannot read the room. You know,
Mm-hmm.
um, I I like the way my like it seems like I don't really fully like have a grasp of certain emotions, and in a way, I'm like emotionally underdeveloped compared to a lot of people, and I have relied on just like thinking logically about literally everything
Mm-hmm.
um, my entire life, because just like that's kind of part of the neurodevelopmental disorder for me, is that I the emotion part of my brain is like just stunted, to be honest, and I can only I use logic to navigate life, and that's actually how I've learned to have the social skills I do, is through like just logically kind of analyzing and studying other people and studying human behavior. And this is a thing that at least it seems comes at least somewhat automatically to most people. But to me, all that stuff is manual. Like I've had to manually learn, like this isn't the right thing to say, this isn't the right way to say it, and stuff for every single thing. And
Mm-hmm.
that's exhausting. And yet that's often like at least tangentially like referred to as masking. And yeah, that can be exhausting. And I'm not gonna be this type of person who just says, it's all hopeless. Like, I can never have social skills and whatever. you know, like because I have tried to learn how people communicate, learn, you know, the ways to communicate, ways to make friends and have relationships and so on. But the thing is, because I'm having to do it manually, I'm always going to be behind, in some way, because you know I like to give the analogy of and you know some people find it's controversial for me to compare myself to a disability like this, but you know it's like a blind person, right? Like they can, you know, they have a, you know, obviously a huge disadvantage, but you know they can learn through other ways how to cross a street, you know, through like auditory, tactile senses and so on. And they can eventually, you know, learn how to navigate their way to go to the shop or whatever. And, you know, um, and that's great and good for them. But, you know, I like to compare that to what I have because I have this like social blindness just because of autism, like the one of the core symptoms, you know. And so it's like I can learn some social skills. But, you know, just like that blind person is never gonna be as good at, you know, at like getting around as someone who has sight, especially in a new place.
So just a quick
And
question. Uh, I'm planning to have an expert on an expert on this topic on
mm,
at some point. But as far as I understand, and we're at this moment we're just one not informed layman's person and one very well informed layman's person talking about this.
mm,
So, but as far as I understand, there is a neurological basis behind this, right? So
yeah,
we is it possible to see the extent to this social blindness that you're talking about? Is it possible to see it directly on a neurological basis?
you mean sort of like brain scans?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, from what I understand it is,
Mm-hmm.
like the way that the wiring in an autistic person's brain is configured is different. Like I mentioned, you know, there's much more focus on and you know, because it's such a broad sort of spectrum of like, you know, diagnoses and stuff, like, you know, you know, this is one of the things that makes it really hard because, you know, you can get two people who are both diagnosed with autism and they may not relate to each other because, you know, they may have different like skills, different interests and stuff. You know, like for me, like I'm quite good at like sort of like technical like STEM subject stuff, right? But if it comes to like playing a guitar or whatever, like I don't know what to do, you know. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's you know it's sort of like I know that they keep changing the criteria and stuff, but you know in a way like you know, like in layman's terms, I would just say it's just a way of like it just means like apart from having a intellectual disability, it just means like you can't function properly in some way,
Mm-hmm.
particularly when it comes to social stuff.
What do you wish for so you're saying that you basically you can't read the room, that's what you're saying, right? So and we compare it
Sure.
basically to a blind person. What and the blind person
Mm,
basically we can fix it, but there is big accommodations we can do for them, right? So we can
yeah.
basically give them social we can give them clues that they can
Mm,
use in order to navigate more or less. So if I start doing something to create an
mm,
automatism for you in order
yeah.
for you to not have to read the room, that
Mm,
will be quite helpful, right, for you.
yeah, definitely.
What,
Yeah,
what
and
would
I
what
guess
would that be? Can you give some
yeah, and I
examples?
guess like something analogous to like Braille for a blind person would be um you know, for someone like me, it would be something like, you know, just sort of like explaining, like giving reasons why, you know, certain
Hmm.
things are happening, sort of like
Can you?
explaining it in terms of logic or just being explicit. And also, you know, it's like if you know, if like I do something wrong, you know, like if I do something that, you know, rubs someone up the wrong way or whatever, just to kind of like point it out and tell me and explain it, and give
Mm-hmm.
me give me a chance to like
Do you have
not
an
repeat
example?
it sort of thing.
For example, I don't know. What I imagine right now is like you making a comment about the appearance of someone where
Yeah.
you think that it's completely just a neutral thing to say, but they're really
Mm.
like hurt about that, or they're really offended about that. Is that
Yeah.
a good example?
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good example because
Mm-hmm.
there is like, and of course I can't speak for every single person with my diagnosis, but like
Mm-hmm.
in my like deep in some core of like my neurology, there's this idea that like what is logical cannot be immoral sort of
Mm-hmm.
thing because it's honesty, it's the truth, it's the objective truth.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like that example with an appearance of someone, right? It's like um, like if you're just being honest, if you're not lying to someone, you know, then it's like there's a limit to actually like how bad that is. And of course, like, I have sort of manually learned over the years that yeah, you shouldn't just if someone if like some fat woman comes over to you and asks how you look, you don't say, "Oh, you're a fat bitch," right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I've learned
No,
that, but that
but
doesn't
bitch.
come naturally to me.
Wait, but bitch would not be analogous. I feel like because
No, yeah,
bitch
yeah. So say
is
you're
already
fat,
the
you're
insult.
obese.
Yeah, just saying
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. So I was just
Wow.
exaggerating,
Yeah.
right? But
Let's
yeah,
say.
just to say like, oh, your BMI must be like
Yeah.
30 or
Yeah.
something. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I kind of learned to be like, oh, just say, oh no, you're fine, sort of thing. Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
but then the question is, if you're learning that, what are you
Mm,
using to learn it? Do you use an algorithm? Basically, do you use a
mm,
rule like I would not want that, therefore I can't
mm,
do it, right? Because I feel
mm,
like that's how most neurotypical that's how
mm,
children are being taught not to do that because
mm.
children do that, right? Children just say, "Wow,
Yeah,
you're really fat. Wow, look at this fat man, mama." Like that's
yeah.
and basically at some point we it's not that intuitive for human beings, I think, in general, to not say to not directly say what they think, but we teach them, look, you wouldn't want to be called that, so therefore
Mm,
you shouldn't do it. So they just try to imagine how they would feel with the weakness of theirs
mm,
if somebody would directly say it to them. Do you use
yeah.
that algorithm? Do you use an algorithm like that, or do you really have to basically hard code every single rule into your
Mm.
memory and to be like, okay, it's not good to call someone fat just as a sentence, or
Yeah.
yeah.
But the thing is, it can be really hard to sort of put myself in another person's shoes like that because, like, throughout most of my life, like, I felt so different to other people. And, what I've realized over time is like a lot of things that actually, like would offend other people wouldn't offend me in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if somebody looked at me and said, yeah, using that example, oh, I have a, like, oh, you're obese or whatever, which I'm not, but if that happened, like, I wouldn't be like angry at that person, you know, I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't like, because they're not lying to me, I don't see what they did wrong in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, like I guess I might be displeased by the remark, but like, at the core, like, like my logical brain is saying, well, they haven't actually like lied to me or deceived me or anything. And,
Mm-hmm.
like it's, they're not like, they shouldn't feel like morally obligated to apologize or anything because they haven't actually like said anything incorrect, you know? And
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm trying to think about. I feel like the way you just described it, that's how a fat person would feel if a child would tell them, "Wow, this is such a fat man," right? That's I feel like that's how I used to be quite fat. I'm still not the thinnest, but I
yeah.
used to be quite fat, and
Mm,
I've I mean not like dangerously fat, but still pretty fat, and
mm,
so I remember that comments about my weight was something where for example, my relatives used to do that. They would just like
Mm,
my uncle. I would not see him for he was
mm,
in the home country, and I would not see him for 6 months, and then
mm,
I would be in front of him, and he would be like, "Wow, you got really fat," you know. He was
mm,
just like that, and it's not
yeah,
because he's autistic. It's just in that culture, they're really like
yeah,
they don't give a fuck.
yeah.
They just
Right. Well,
say it like
yeah,
that.
actually, kind of just I just want to respond to that quickly
Yeah.
because there was actually yeah a time in my life for a while when I was overweight.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like, yeah, sure, I didn't feel great about it, but my family would do something similar, but, they wouldn't just like it wasn't just like remarking I was fat, I remember like my or like there was like a family friend or whatever who literally just like came up to me and said like, "Dude, you look like you're pregnant," kind of thing. Was like proper roasting me, and is like
Yeah.
going out of his way to roast me. And that was that pissed me off, and, I guess maybe he was doing it intentionally, whatever. But,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, I don't that's not really in my nature to kind of go after someone like that, I would just give a remark sort of thing,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Because it's like, I mean, maybe if I was intentionally trying to hurt that person's feelings, I would,
Mm-hmm.
do that, you know? Call someone a fat bitch, like I kind of exaggerated earlier.
Mm-hmm.
But,
But
it's like just by, like, being objective, seems to not be okay, kind of.
I guess what I'm wondering is, for just for this tiny example, I guess there is
Yeah.
way more complicated examples
Yeah.
where this can be an issue. But just for this small thing, for example, not saying stuff that is negative about
Mm.
another person,
Mm.
not pointing out something negative
Yeah.
about another person,
Yeah.
that that basically you can you basically have to remember. How do you navigate that in general? What's the
Yeah.
algorithm? What's happening there?
Right, well, yeah, well, I mean, nowadays, really, I've just sort of learned to just, like, say, to just minimize what I say generally, because the thing is, yeah, yeah, sure, like, I have those, like, yeah, algorithms in my head of, like, generally, like, saying, saying a negative remark to someone will have negative social consequences and stuff. But, a lot of the time, it seems to be so much more nuanced than that, you know? It's not just like, "Oh, okay, you're gonna be socially successful and have loads of friends as long as you don't blurt out about someone being
Sure,
fat."
sure, sure,
Like
sure. Of course,
it's much more than that. Like,
of
maybe
course.
maybe if I'm 5 years old and I learn that, then yeah, I'm good for like a year or something, or a few months, until a next thing comes up. But yeah, it just seems like there are so many things, like so many factors in play that like I have to kind of process in a social
Hmm.
situation. And I've been in like a lot of people will kind of see me as like the funny guy. Like I can be witty sometimes, I can make good jokes, and I think that's because I can see the logic in things and stuff.
Hmm.
But what happens is sometimes if I make a joke, it doesn't land, you know?
Hmm.
Like, but sometimes it does land and it's really good. And it can just be because like I just can't read the room properly. And
Hmm.
in a sense, a lot of these questions about reading the room, it's sort of like asking a blind person what the color red is. Kind of,
Hmm.
because it feels like there's just stuff that I'm not picking up that most other people seem to be able to pick up.
Hmm.
And
Just
yeah, like I can kind of have these broad algorithms in my head, right? Yeah, like about, don't say things that, you anticipate to be received negatively by people and stuff, like, commenting on someone being overweight or whatever. Like, yeah, I've got that covered.
hmm.
Um,
But do you have
but
it
it
like
just
covered hard coded, or do you have it covered as an algorithm? If you
Oh,
know
I
what I
have it
mean.
covered, like, hard-coded.
Hard
Yeah,
coded. Okay, so
yeah,
it's like fat and all the characteristics are there in a single
mm,
array, right?
yeah,
Basically.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and it's just sometimes
Mhm.
it's just better just to say just to o omit things, because
Yeah.
Like, you know, if I like if I just like go up to approach someone and start a conversation, like I just don't have the confidence that like I'm gonna be able to carry it. And also because like I do because like yeah, every conversation is different, right? Like I can rehearse, you know, if I know I'm gonna have an interaction with someone on a certain day, like
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I can spend some time before like rehearsing what I'm gonna say, sort of like a
Mm-hmm.
rough draft, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, that can get me so far. But then the problem is like, you know, there are so many factors at play and I can't always predict exactly how the conversation is gonna go.
Of course.
No single conversation is exactly the same. So it's like
That sounds
I
really, really exhausting.
yeah, that's why I like to spend a lot of time on my own nowadays and just
Yeah.
'cause it's just yeah, it is.